Just really quick, I wanted to remind y'all that the Games and Online Harassment Hotline is here for you, for your friends, and your colleagues. We provide emotional support to folks who make or play games, which is such a broad range of people. So, you know, you might not need it today, but maybe you need it tomorrow. So we just want you to know about it. You can learn more at gameshotline.org.
You want to sit around the campfire telling stories and shit. I heard that and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know about Cole, but I sure do. Like,
Me too, yeah.
It seems great. Like, they have community. Mm-hmm. Like, they have something real. Like, they belong to something that's bigger than themselves.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Ebony Adams, and I'm joined today by two women who can barely keep Budweiser and craft singles in their refrigerators. Carolyn Pettit.
Hey, hey.
And Anita Sarkeesian.
What's up?
This week we're going to be talking about Concrete Cowboy, a new Netflix film starring Idris Elba, Lorraine Toussaint, and Stranger Things' Caleb McLaughlin. Stay tuned. Okay, let's get into some bants. How's everybody doing?
I love that we missed you so much that we're like, you have to host now. We just need more Ebony, you know?
Well, that is, something I'm used to hearing, Anita, so I was happy to step into the captain's seat. No, y'all know that, like, it is a problem when I host because things go off the rails when I'm just a regular co-host. If I'm in the, captain's chair, y'all don't know where this episode might end up.
I love that, like, hosting is such a big thing, but it's just reading the script. But
it's
the only thing that's
you kind of got to
different.
keep things going. You kind of got to, try and anticipate what might be a fruitful vein of commentary.
A little bit, but we all do that, right? Like, I think we've done this for so long that I feel like the core of this show, we all are responsible for. So, but that's true.
No, this is not, I would say this is not something to be nervous over. Like, I'm not, sweating it, because also we have 3 listeners and they love us, right? Y'all love us. So at this point, you know what you're going to get. I'm just saying, specifically if I'm the one driving the boat, it's likely to end up, on the rocks.
Sure.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Anyways, how are y'all doing? Talk to me. Give me the news.
I have cramps today.
Okay.
That sucks.
It sure does. And you are someone who doesn't like to take painkillers, so you're just suffering.
Oh, no, I took painkillers. It still sucks. I take painkillers so I'm not, like, dead. I take painkillers so I can, like, lay in bed all day instead of dying on the bathroom floor.
And by painkillers, you mean pomegranate gummies?
Oh, man, I wish I had pomegranate gummies. Someone send me pomegranate gummies, please.
Don't, what do they call it? Enjoining a felony? Do not send this girl drugs through the mail. I mean, feel free to drop them off.
Hey, Carolyn, how are you today?
Hey, I mean, I wish I could come in here and say, hey, I'm doing great. I mean, I'm not doing great. It's another day in America. We've got in Texas, we've got incredibly cruel, we've got hearings over incredibly cruel legislation, that would do just, again, just really monstrous things to trans young people. Of course, we've got another young Black man murdered by a cop. It's another day. It's another day in America. It's awful. And I mean, and on top of that, I mean, it's again, just shout out to everyone out there struggling with quarantine loneliness, because that's still a real and debilitating thing, and it's real for me too. So, just a lot going on. I mean, it's it is what it is, and we're getting through it. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I'm certainly happy to be here today, talking to both of you wonderful people, and here for the listeners and all that. But not gonna lie and say that everything is just peachy keen these days, when it's when I'm kind of having a hard time, if I'm honest.
Yo, that's real. And I don't want to race into the main for this episode as if you haven't just spoken that. Excuse me. and as if that's not the case.
Well, no, but I mean that. But this is like I say this. I allude to this every week, and it's. I mean, at least the things in my personal life. Obviously, the larger the issues of. I mean, the attack on perhaps the attack on trans young people. Maybe that's something we haven't spoken too much about, or as much about as we could have. And it's really truly horrifying watching that escalate. I mean, week after week, or it's one state and then it's another and then it's another. And I mean, so right now, for instance, the hearings in Texas that are currently happening, among one of the things this legislation would do is that if loving parents, if a child indicates to their parents that they are trans or that they are like gender non-conforming, and if the parents honor that or give the child space to explore that and to express that child might be taken away from their parents. So,
Jesus Christ.
It's, I mean, as a trans adult, certainly for me, I often wish that, I'd had access to and been able to get the healthcare, like affirming care when I was younger, because I knew I was trans from a very young age, but obviously society being what it was and my parents being who they were, it wasn't a world or a society in which I knew it would be dangerous and to speak that truth. But it can make such a huge difference in a person's life, a trans person's life, if they are able to not only to live as the person they are from a young age, but if you can get care from a young age that is affirming, it can impact the quality of the rest of your life. If you can maybe not have to undergo puberty in your body, being of the gender that you are assigned at birth, right? When that that's not the changes that you want or what have you. I mean, and so to see, I mean, and it really, of course, it's all just it's just the right's latest effort to whip up hysteria and fear, over something, in lieu of actually doing anything to improve people's lives or to be public servants and to address the actual issues that our society is facing. This is how they appeal to their base. They maintain, they present themselves as moral, protectors and arbiters, even though they're obviously their actions are, of course, deeply immoral and oppressive and cruel. But that's just the trajectory. This is just the latest in that long trajectory of the American right, and now it's targeting trans children, and it's terrible.
It's terrible and it's cruel, and as people have been saying, the cruelty is the point. There's something monstrous about saying to parents or caregivers that affirming your child's identity will incur, intervention of the state. That it is everything that we are learning that's going on at state legislator level is horrible as it relates to, healthcare for trans kids or, potential, adoptions or whatever. But this just seems like an extra step into evil that I honestly can't wrap my head around.
It's so backward. I mean, it's so it's, to me, obviously, it's so obvious that the right and kind and just and moral and noble thing to do is, of course, to honor your child's identity and expression and let them be who they are. It's such a no-brainer, and yet so to to have it be maybe legislated that to do that is wrong and illegal. I mean, obviously there's so many unjust law. There's no correlation between justice and the law in so many ways, right? In it's just in our society, but it's as obviously as a trans person to see that happen when you know what the right thing is, and it's it's really it's disorienting, and it's very it's really it's very painful. It's just painful.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how, like, I made a joke the other day just being like, hey, remember when Trump was president? And I was just thinking, like it there's something around, like, it's a relief to some degree to not have to hear his name and hear his voice, and see all the shit that he's doing, but it's not like there's a relief in the country, right? There's not a relief in the horrific empowerment that the right has. And honestly, let's be honest, has had for a really long time, and is targeting that hatred to trans people now in similar ways that they targeted that hatred to other marginalized groups. And it's just like exhausting. And I'm not trying to minimize how horrifying it is. It's just like, it's always something else. Like, they're always finding something else in some other vulnerable group to just demonize and to like legislate out of existence. And it's just like, fucking hell.
Yep. Yeah. So, thanks for giving me a little space to voice my anger and my grief around those things that are happening right now.
Yeah, we keep you lifted, Caro. We keep you lifted.
How are you, Ebony?
Well, on the day that we record this, Monday, April 12th, woke up to the news, as Caro mentioned, that the Brooklyn Center PD in Minnesota had killed 20-year-old Dante Wright at a traffic stop. I'm not going to go into a long spiel here about how the police need to be abolished. If you are still resting comfortably in the notion that the police can be reformed, I urge you to disabuse yourself of that notion. There are no tweaks. There are no fixes. There are no adjustments that can be made, even if these were being made in good faith, and they are not. A lot of the calls for reform that you are saying are simply about giving these police departments and these organizations more money with which to terrorize our communities. I am in the position of having shut down a lot of my emotional input, because I simply can't breathe and live with the constant fear. I had a really hard time last year after Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd were murdered, and Breonna Taylor. Like, I had a really hard time. And so I'm trying to find ways to still live and still fight, and retain my humanity, but also knowing that, I'm able to only digest things in little pieces. So yeah, this is, y'all, listen, we got to keep it 100 with you. This is the story behind the podcast, the people who, we're all human beings, and, shit is going down, and, you can be smiling and laughing in one moment, and then the next minute not be able to get up off your couch. So how are we doing? We're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
Is the answer to that. But,
Exactly.
But it's a lot. Yeah, y'all. And it seems so facile to say, like, take care of yourselves, or, step back if you need to, because that often puts the onus of responsibility on the individual, when I'm not the problem here. Right. The problem is the culture in which we live, like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
The problem is the police. The problem is not me. Yeah. The problem is these legislatures. It's not me. So, I can self-care myself into a coma, but when I wake up after that smooth spa nap, Black people are still being killed by the police. So what are we going to do about that?
Yep.
Woo, okay. Y'all, we're going to get into this, but I assume we will be talking more about this later. And we will try and, amplify those voices of the people that we trust to be giving, nuanced and helpful information for those who are looking for ways to get out the fight on these issues. But yeah, let's turn to our topic for today, which is Concrete Cowboy, available now on Netflix.
I don't know who they expect us to go up and be if we watching over our shoulder all our lives.
I have something for you.
Oh, look.
Like real cowboy.
People used to believe that breaking a horse meant crushing the will of the animal. The only way you can realize its true spirit is through love.
So Concrete Cowboy is a film from first-time director Ricky Staub. It's the affecting story of Cole, a 15-year-old from Detroit who's sent to Philadelphia to stay with his estranged father, a legendary urban cowboy and leader of the local horse riding community. The film is based upon the novel Ghetto Cowboy by Greg Neri. In the film, as Cole struggles to establish a rapport with his father, he also reconnects with an old friend whose drug dealing puts them both in danger. Let me start by saying I hit up Anita over the weekend, what's up? And as I often do, I started with telling her, I think this person is fine. Basically, I hit Anita up to tell her one of two things. I made something good to eat. Here's a picture. B, here's this fine person I just saw on my screen. What do you think the correct answer is?
Also occasionally lipstick.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
the third.
So those three things,
That's
right?
the only thing that we talk
none
about.
of it is pressing. None of it is urgent. It's either food, fineness, or fashion, right? That's what we have to talk about. So I hit up Anita and was like, yo, Idris Elba and Method Man wearing cowboy hats. Boom. That was all you needed to say. I was, down for the count in this movie. And Anita immediately blew my mind by telling me she did not like this movie. So I cannot wait for us to get into this. Carolyn wisely stayed out of it and was like, I'm not gonna let you know what I think about this film until it's time to record and, heat up the airwaves. But yeah, I'm really interested in why you didn't like the movie, Anita, because I did. It was by no means perfect. It is absolutely clear that this is a first-time director, but I have a lot of good feelings about this film. I enjoyed watching it, so I'm gonna turn it to you and Caro before I bring it back and then tell you why I loved it.
Okay, first I'm gonna start with I'm fucking organized for this conversation for the first time ever. Like I took my notes and I organized them and I summarized them. Shit, y'all should be so impressed with me. But under my list of things that I loved, there's a couple of things above this, but the list goes as follows. Idris Elba. Idris Elba in a cowboy hat. Idris Elba with no shirt on. Idris Elba riding a horse. Idris Elba freestyling.
Yes.
These are the things I loved. There are a couple things, but I'll share the stuff that I liked as you start talking, because I'm sure there'll be some overlap. Because there are things that I appreciated in this film, but overall, I honestly, at some point, I watched it with a neighbor and was like, can we stop watching this? And he was like, you're the one that has to watch it. And I was like, ugh. I had a really hard time finishing it because I felt like my overall thoughts here are that it was so painfully formulaic and it was so tropey that it did a massive disservice to the uniqueness of the people and the community that it's showing. So I feel like there's two things happening. One, I think this story in and of itself was not the best way to highlight this community, that I don't think it should have been through the lens of this kid in this context. But given that it is that way, I think that the vision for it was so uninspired that there were and I can get into all the details about why I think this and why there weren't these good transitions and character motivations and unearned moments. But overall, I felt like it just kind of wedged people in. It didn't actually show characters who, really, why? Smush and Cole, there's nothing there. There's nothing fucking there. And so I just felt like it was really formulaic. And as I was watching it, I kept going, this feels like a first-time director. Like this, and this feels like a film school first time director kind of thing. And when I looked it up, I wasn't surprised to know that this was a first feature. And I kept kind of wanting to be like, hey, as someone who's trying to get into directing, I suddenly was like, man, I don't know if I could make anything better than this. But I've seen so many films from first time directors that are fucking amazing, right? So and as a critic, I can't let that necessarily inform my perception of it. So I just thought it was a very weak film that did a huge disservice to this really cool, interesting community.
Yeah, let's, emphasize first for, because some listeners may not be aware, the, community, North Philadelphia has an actual community or communities, or certainly a rich history of Black, cowboys who live there and who are cowboys there and who ride horses there and everything. And I read the review at RogerEbert.com by Odie Henderson. And he said that he felt that a documentary would have maybe better served this, this community and the people of the community than this, narrative film does. And in fact, many of the people we see in the film, many of the, the actors in the group of riders that Idris Elba's character, sort of leads, I guess, are like actual, Philadelphia, Black, cowboys and riders. And, we find this out like at the end of the film or over the end credits, we see some of them talking about like their, a little bit about like breaking the fourth wall and being like, just talking about like them being themselves as real people. And it was like, wow, like that's really cool and interesting. Like, yeah, I kind of would have rather, and so for me, the big issues with the film, I don't know if it's the directing. I really think it's the screenplay. For me, it is kind of formulaic. I don't think that it really. I mean, there are lots of images in this film that I love, and I think just the fact that it is that there is value in it. The fact that it's such at least on screen, it is such a Black film. I guess the director is a white guy.
So the director's white, which actually really pissed me off when I found out.
Yeah.
He also co-wrote the screenplay.
So yeah. So, I mean, but like just seeing these images on screen of like these, of Black people like living this life and like riding horses and everything, like there is beauty and there is power in that and value. And like I really was moved by this, just by seeing this depicted on screen. But yeah, like I felt like the relationships were underdeveloped, particularly the relationship between the father and son that is so central to the film. I felt like Idris Elba's character is not a great dad, and that the film doesn't really like reckon with that, maybe. And it's sort of the way that it at a certain point becomes a little bit of like a little mini heist, like we have to break into the police station and like free the horses and the thing. It just felt misguided to me. Like I felt like that time would have been better spent on like character development and another kind of resolution than some like, it just felt, it felt tonally, it felt a little bit all over the place too. It felt like it kind of like that resolution was a bit kind of movie for kids kind of thing, but a lot of the stuff with Smush felt much more like, not like geared at like young viewers. So I don't know. I felt like it was very uneven, but so my verdict would be that the film is okay. Like, I think it could have been way better, and I wish it had been way better because I think that these people are worthy of like having their story told, and they're fascinating. But I don't think this film was the best vehicle for that. But anyway.
Yeah, I am. So obviously, I disagree.
Sure.
Or I shouldn't say I disagree because it's not. You
but
can't disagree with someone's interpretation. But
but
I,
you can.
I liked the film,
Mm-hmm.
and as I said, it is clear that it is a first-time director who is still perhaps learning that simply because like filmic tropes exist does not mean that one needs to like check off a list. You know, I need to have a rising score here. I need to, I need to have the bad kid do this. I need to have the tense moment with the parents here. You know, like there are definitely ways in which this story would have benefited from a more adept hand. I have not read the novel that it's based on, but I hear nothing but wonderful things about Greg Neary's work. He writes middle grade and YA stuff, and I think it is clear to me that that is firmly the genre in which this movie exists. So, and I don't mean to say that, like, simply because something is written for a young audience, that it's, we should, kind of give it the benefit of the doubt and not demand as high a quality. But I do think, there's a way in which this is, kind of in service of telling a story that will appeal to kids or, young people in a certain way. I also think that this film, it's about Cole and the North Philly horse riding community and Black horse owning community is the backdrop for Cole's story. But because that community is so new to many viewers, they focus specifically on the Black cowboys and the urban cowboys of it, right? And we in a way, we hyper focus on that. And I think many folks, not necessarily you and Anita, but many folks focus on that. And we're so interested in that what we want is then a sociological treatment, a newspaper article. We want, facts and figures. We want like a historical treatment about that community as opposed to the narrative that we are given.
But
and I want to push back on that a little bit because it mirrors something that happens in media criticism and in literary criticism quite a bit, which is the ways in which like raced communities are only allowed to navigate through narrative in ways that are legible to mainstream white audiences that via certain channels. And often those channels are ones in which, like we want to unpack like the archaeology of something, but we don't allow them to exist in text in the same way. But it's, again, I'm not saying that's what's going on with you and Caro, but it's some of the criticism that I've read of the film. I'm like, okay, yeah, a documentary would be great. This is not that.
Can I push back on this a little bit?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to discount what you're saying at all. Like that is that is very likely a reality, and it's a new idea to me. So thank you for bringing that up. I would argue, though, that I don't think that this, I mean, it could be a documentary. I don't really give a shit about whether it is or isn't. I want a narrative that is not, like, when you say it's legible to white audiences, I think what my argument is that what we got was that, and what we should have got could have been something else. What we got was a story about a kid trying to decide whether he was going to go down the good path or, like, be a drug dealer. And that is a story we've had a million fucking times. That's a story that white people love to see about Black people. And like, I don't think that that's original or interesting. I understood at the end when we started to hear from the non-actors in the film who are actually from the community, not to refer to them as non-actors, but who are members of the community, that like, that was kind of the framing for them, is that they, one of the men speaking talked about how like, it was either join the stables and become a cowboy or like, go join a gang and be a part of, sell drugs and stuff. But I didn't think that needed to be the story. And if it was, I think it needed to be a lot more smooth and less tropey. And so I would just push back on that. What is actually legible to white communities point here being like, I think that's what actually happened here. And that was part of the problem.
But I think that even that gets complicated in the film, right? Because we're ready for there to be this kind of black and white understanding of, good dad Harp, perhaps misunderstood dad Harp, and, bad influence Smush, right? And Caro, you're absolutely right. Like, at no point do I feel, that Harp sort of earns his redemption in this film, but it's Idris Elba, so I'm gonna let him have everything. But Smush, right? Like, I think the film, now we could argue about it. I think we would argue about how well this is done, but I think the film does offer a complication to that characterization of Smush, right? Because, he's kind of a, player, he's clearly out of his league when it comes to his position in the hierarchy of that crew, that Jalen's crew that he runs with. But when we actually talk to Smush and we find out that A, he used to be part of the writing community himself, right? And still holds lots of love for it. But B, the reason why he's engaged in this selling is that he wants to buy a ranch, and he wants to get away from like the oppressive noise, as he calls it. He wants some silence. And I just thought that was so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because his dream, when they talk, his whole dream in the year 2021, this young Black kid in Philly, the dream of going west. I just thought that was so interesting because that is the prototypical, kind of American push. But the parallels of that, because he talks about buying a ranch and flipping it. And I'm like, oh, young brother, this idea that you're going to buy ranch after ranch and just flip them and then eventually find the one you want to settle down on, God bless.
Which is so cute for a kid who doesn't know any better.
Parallel to the gentrification. Say again?
Well, I said it's so cute for a kid who doesn't know any better, right? Smush is the only developed character in this whole movie. He is so much more interesting than everyone else in a way that was really difficult to deal with because that whole tangent about Cole and Smush was really frustrating. Why was Cole with him? Cole never seemed excited or interested to be with him. The transitions between that were really bad. You don't really get why he's even hanging out with him at all. It was such a non-relationship. But
it really could have been developed more. But I mean, I guess Cole's awkwardness with him made sense to me because we learned that he hasn't seen him for 10 years. He hasn't seen him since he was 5 years old. And now he's interacting with him as a teenager. Smush is a young man. And I'm like, yeah, I can see it being okay, the last time I saw you, we were shooting water guns at each other. But now you're driving me around. We're getting high. I'm going to parties with adults. So yeah, it could have been. But, I was smoothing over a lot of the bumps in the story just because first of all, Caleb McLaughlin, I loved in this movie. I thought there was something really interesting in the way that he is framed in various shots. And I know we're going to talk about the DP because for real, there were scenes where I was like, if this motherfucker doesn't learn how to light a black face, I'm going to lose my shit. I'm going to lose my shit.
The opening shot, I was like, where the fuck is your character? Do you not have lighting?
It is amazing to me and the ways in which people will just let a black character be in shadow for no purpose and just assume that we don't show up. We're not fucking vampires. We will show up on screen if y'all light us correctly. And if you can't light Black people or brown people or people other than white folks, you need to learn your craft. Okay, but nevertheless, there are amazing shots of Cole that I really loved the way that they kind of set up his position and his understanding of himself versus how others see him. So when Cole is alone in a shot, he fills the frame more in line with his understanding of him as being grown and autonomous, right? But when you see him framed next to his mother or his father, you see how small Cole actually is. He's 15. I thought it was great how in the very beginning, we see his mother walk past him in that school corridor, and he just looks so forlorn in that shot and looks so young. And then there's a scene where he's standing, across from his father and kind of squaring up, and he's trying to puff himself up. But again, you just see how young he is. I thought that was really excellently done. And, for all I know, it could have been accidents. Because, again, there was a lot of stuff about the way this film was shot where I was confused. But sometimes they stumbled on just really emotive, photography in this film that I really enjoyed, And, oh, my God, the scenes of, the folks riding horses, not just solo folks, but, when they're writing in honor of Smush at the end of the film, like there were come on, there were some brilliant moments
That
there where
fucking
you were just
party?
like,
Yeah, that party, I was like, I am so down for this. This is great. Like, let's hang out at this party. Something should happen at the party. And then nothing fucking happens. You're just like, why did you waste this beautiful scene to make it a non-point in the movie? Like,
But see, I loved that. I loved that, you know, and I get that, you know, yeah, does it advance the plot? Maybe.
He goes
maybe
from the party where he just kind of looks forlorn while everybody is having this great time, which I loved, right? To all of a sudden being in a car with Smush, and you're like, how the fuck did you get there? And I would forgive all of that if there was character development and there was a reason that I understood that was happening. But they didn't do any of that.
I mean, for me, the scenes around the parties and like the scenes around the campfire and everything, those were great because just seeing these people have like just community and just like be together and talk to each other about whatever, like just shooting the shit and stuff like that, you know, that was great. And like, so there's a point later in the film where Smush says to Cole, when he's there, when he's kind of like taunting him, he says something like, you want to sit around the campfire telling stories and shit. And I heard that and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know about Cole, but I sure do. Like,
Me too, yeah.
It seems great. Like they have community, like they have each other to like, you know, they have something real. Like they belong to something that's bigger than themselves, and it's good, right?
Yeah, totally.
So those scenes,
it's just not well done. Like I totally agree. I just think that it's kind of meh.
But for me, the point of those scenes was to show how Black the entire the world was and how integrated it was. And so this myth, this persistent myth of like Blackness, you know, being equated purely with like, you know, poverty and a certain type of urban living. You know, the lie is proven in those scenes where you have like these joyful moments of community at that community barbecue, that block party. At the same time, the people are dancing to like very modern hip hop music. You know, in the background, you got a fucking horse race going on, and
which is
none of the people there are like, "What the shit is going on?" Because this is absolutely part. Yeah, exactly. So, like, the point of that scene for me was showing that, like, the community knows about this. This stable is absolutely part of the fabric of their community, and so that was the point of it.
There's a really cool shot near the end that's like a transitional scene that shows like these people and their horses sort of integrated into the city, like in a way that I was like, this is the fucking movie. Like, why did you save this for the end? Like, this is what's so interesting about these people in this community. And I agree. I love that. And I loved the parts around, like, not loved, but I liked the parts around the fire pit and them sitting around when it wasn't like overly done. Like there was one scene, the big scene where there's the big lecture, where I'm like, okay, this got real preachy in a way that like a smoother writer could have like done something with, but then it transitioned into a place where I was like, oh, now you're like just talking about your experiences and not like lecturing. And I was like, I could sit here and listen to this all day.
Yeah. Did y'all miss the outside during those scenes? I missed the outside so much. Just like sitting around talking at the very beginning. First of all, also we've mentioned Idris Elba, Caleb McLaughlin doing great work. Lorraine Toussaint, the look she has in this movie, that's how I'm planning to dress the rest of my life. Just FYI. But she's sitting on her stoop at the beginning. And Caro, I know you feel me on this. I was like, if I could sit on a stoop in just like a vibrant urban neighborhood right now, I always think about New York and my family and friends in New York.
Yeah.
And like the point of it, like I'm not talking about being in the suburbs or even the country and sitting outside. That's great too. But in the city and the sounds of the city around you. And when it's hot, it's summertime and you can't bear to be inside and it's late at night and kids are still out running the streets, you know? There's something just magical about that. And it is so interesting to me, the different places that are open and giving and receptive in this movie and the places that are not. And we don't, hopefully we'll have time to go into this in the bonus, but one of the things that, you know, really stuck with me is the stables themselves. So, Method Man, dude had me questioning my commitment to abolition. He plays a cop in this movie. I'm telling you, for a second, I was like, some cops are okay. But, he's real when he says, like, he continually tells the stable, owners and the horse owners, they're like, you need to get your shit together. The city is trying to take this property. Developers are trying to take this property. You need to get your shit together. You need to clean up the area. You need to, I'm not saying this needs to be like a strip mall, you need to renovate, but you got to get your shit together. And so it's no surprise when the city does step in at the end of the film. But there are moments in the film where I caught myself saying, like, looking at the stables and how dilapidated it is. And we do see the body of a dead horse that's on the property that hasn't been taken away later. And you're like, man, this makes me uncomfortable to think of horses in this environment. They didn't choose to be there. In these constricted spaces, with, roofs that aren't maintained and everything. But I was like, isn't it interesting that we will have that thought about these animals, but we don't ask about the people who also live in that environment, who live on that same block, who live in places that are in the same condition or worse. When the city steps in, it's because, they've gotten complaints about the maltreatment and the malnourishment of the animals, and they come to take them away. But what about the people who live in that neighborhood and who have tried to make something there? I don't know. This could be me, just seeing a lot of stuff that wasn't there in the movie. But first of all, y'all, I grew up in Wyoming. So anything having a hint of a taste of a scintilla of a soupçon of a Black person in a saddle, I'm here for it.
I mean,
so that could be just my kryptonite.
When you were like Idris Elba as a cowboy, I was like, I'm sold.
Yeah, I know, right?
I love both of those things so much. It's a problem.
And you were like, I'm willing to give it a shot. And I appreciate that, Anita. You gave it a shot.
There is one thing I want to bring up before we have to wrap up, though, if I can, that there's a moment of tenderness that really, even though I was like so pieced out at this point, really got me. And it was when the father was cleaning the blood off of Cole at the end in the spoilers, whatever, in the end, in the stables. And it was like, that scene was remarkable. It was beautiful. It was tender. It was caring. I think, Carolyn, that was in the very sad attempt of this film was supposed to be the redemption of the father. I don't think it is, but that was probably what they were thinking. In the same way that like Cole is now dating that woman who you're just like, where the fuck did this come from? That wasn't earned.
A shot of a fridge with like more food in it would have been
great.
Might have gone a long some way toward me feeling like, okay, all right. Like he's honestly, putting in a little effort here,
I struggled with that because I was like, Idris Elba is so hot, but this character is a piece of shit. And I hate being attracted to these like shitty men who just don't. And it happens all the time, right? Where you're just like, we are raised in a patriarchal society that teaches us that like stoic men who just don't show emotions are hot. And I'm like, no, let's get out of this. So the whole time I was like, Idris Elba, you're hot, but fuck you. Anyways, I just wanted to bring up that because I felt like that was such a tender, really, truly beautiful moment. And also Cole's character cries outside of just losing his friend. So like men and boys are only allowed to cry, and they're not really allowed to, but they are allowed to when someone dies. But like he was crying because he's just like upset and like feeling left out and doesn't have a place in the world. And I thought that was really important to show that emotion in a young Black boy.
Holy shit. At the very beginning, when his mom drops him off and then drives away and he's banging on the car window and he's calling, mommy, don't leave me here. Listen, Caleb acted his ass off in this movie. I will just say that.
I mean,
and then
a little too much, I'll say.
Okay, I'm gonna come over to your house and fight you.
I thought he was great. I thought he was great. And so people who don't, Caleb, he's from Stranger Things. And it is good to see him get a leading role. And first of all, he's definitely making the transition really well from like kid actor to like young adult / like a lot of, people, you don't see them making that transition, but I feel like, okay, I think he'll he'll have a hopefully a good long career ahead of him. But also just like, and I mean, this is such a different character. Like, he's great on Stranger Things, and he has that like that endearing kind of gawky nerdiness or whatever. But here, like, Cole is very different in his body. He's very different, like, physically, and just like how he expresses himself and holds himself. And so, this was like the first performance where I'm like, oh, okay, he has range as an actor. Like, he can do multiple things.
And let's hope that he gets to work with a more accomplished director in future. But for me, I enjoyed the film. I encourage people to check it out. And, hey, if you don't like it, cool. But at least stick with it until you see Idris Elba in that cowboy hat and denim shirt. If you are someone who, is attracted to men, this will do you. It'll set you up for a couple of...
It'll help you at least through the first, like, third of the film. I will. So, okay, I'm in this place. I've mentioned this a couple times. I'm in this place where, like, because I'm learning about directing, I'm in that, like, pendulum swing when you learn about something new where it's all you can see. So I'm just totally acknowledging that I'm in that very annoying, like, everything is about directing right now for me. I think when I just wanted to clarify too, that when I said I think he was a little overacting, is that there were moments in this film where I was like, I guarantee the director gave this direction, and the actors are acting a direction that I don't think was right for that moment, right? That's obviously just my opinion. So I think Caleb overacted in some parts of this, probably because that was instructed, right? Or guided. And the reason I say that is because which I think we should bring up also in the main, is that I love that there was a character in a wheelchair. And that it wasn't like about overcoming being in a wheelchair. He was just a part of the community. That was great. When he was talking about why he was in the wheelchair and the shit that went down with his brother, I was like, I was like, first of all, I wish that they didn't have that, because I would have loved this guy to just be in this world and, like, be a character in the world without it being about being in a wheelchair. But also, regardless of that, he told that story like it was the first time he ever told that story. And I was like, if you've dealt with this kind of trauma, you've probably told it a few times and wouldn't have been that big of an emotional moment. And so I feel like that was just part of the direction of the vision of the director being like, hey, this needs to be like this big, like, you're learning about this thing for the first time and all that. And maybe it was,
I
right?
think, to be honest, I think it's because that's one of the people who was a non-professional actor, and that is his actual story. So
yes, I realized that afterwards, right? Like, obviously,
so I
at the end.
It could be that, I think it's probably a little from column A, a little from column B, like the director saying, encouraging that kind of performance, but also, a non-working actor thinking like,
totally. It's also
kind of reaching for that kind of like stagey kind of declamatory performance when something quieter would have sufficed and actually would have worked a lot better.
Alternate take to the film. What if it was about Nessie and her fucking badass crew of people that she's working with, trying to save this space, right?
Like, what if it was just about the women? Always a question I'm asking. But again, then is there a role for Idris Elba? I'm always asking if there's a role for Idris Elba.
Look, let's be honest. Idris Elba's character wasn't really that important, and he wasn't around that much, to be honest. So, like, he could have the exact same kind of role in a movie about Nessie owning the stables and running the stables or whatever.
Love it.
There we go. Let's make that movie.
Let's pitch it. All right. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more in the bonus, but for now, we are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to share some freak outs. Stay with us.
Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you are, we would love you to support us to keep making it. If you become one of our patrons, not only are you going to do that and allow us to keep making this every week, but also you get access to some perks like bonus episodes, participate in polls to determine future episodes, access to our Discord server, which is only available to patrons, and, other things. If you love us, help support us. You can do that at patreon.com/femfreak.
What's your freak out?
Okay, so who wants to go first on freak outs?
I'll go first. Mine's not anything monumental or anything. So I watched this past week. I watched the director's cut of the film Doctor Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining. And so I don't.
I'm sorry. There's a sequel to The Shining.
Yeah. I mean, it's not by. So it's
There's a reason you haven't heard of it.
Well, okay. So I don't have any. I don't have any particular relationship to The Shining, beyond it being like a film that as a film, I've never read the book. But as a film I saw once when I was probably, 12 or 13, and it definitely was like very unsettling and creepy to me. And, and obviously like it's iconic as a film in that it's referred to constantly and it's talked about constantly. So I'm aware of the power that its images have in the sort of as cultural like currency of a sort. But it's not a film that I'm not a big fan of it, but nor do I dislike it. I have no relationship to it with regard to that. So, but I heard, that the Dr. Sleep. So Dr. Sleep is by, I want to say his name is Mike Flanagan. I should have had this ready to go. Mike Flanagan, who may be best known to a lot of folks for doing, I think, the Netflix, like The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, on Netflix. But anyway, so this film, it stars. So the concept is it's Danny Torrance, the kid in The Shining, but as an adult. Like that's the main connection to The Shining. And Dan Torrance is played by Ewan McGregor, and so the director's cut is 3 hours long, but it didn't feel 3 hours long. And okay, the core like narrative like conflict in this film it's like not at all what I would have expected from a sequel to The Shining, because it's like a struggle between good and evil, where you kind of have like Dan Torrance, and this young black girl who is like the latest young person who's like super gifted with The Shining. It's kind of them. They team up as almost like psychic superheroes in a way to defeat this like band of like soul vampires, this group of people who lives for like hundreds and hundreds of years by like draining the soul essence from other like talented people. So it's almost got like, it's not an action movie vibe, but it's got like this like kind of, like almost slightly like superhero-y like struggle between good and evil thing going on. And but it's also really, obviously, it's very much about trauma, and it's about Dan Torrance as an adult of an alcoholic parent, and like how his father, because The Shining is really about alcoholism, and so it's about like how does he, make his way in the world, and like while The Shining is pretty bleak and hopeless, I mean, I don't want to say hopeless, but it's cold and it's depressing, and it ends on a dour note. Because the alcoholism, wins. This is a film about like recovery, and it's about like finding, people with whom you can like belong and recover and like find that you have value. And, so, which I was just not expecting at all. And I guess, for me as the adult, child of also an alcoholic father, like there are really tender moments in this film where Dan Torrance gets into AA, and he gets like his 8-year chip at one point in the film, and he talks about like trying to forgive his father for the things that he did, because he knows that his father was in some way, like haunted by his own demons and like doing the best that he could, or he just didn't live up to his own, ideals. And that I think, I imagine that certainly for me, and I imagine that for a lot of like people who grew up with maybe an alcoholic parent and want to like be full human beings in the world, that there might be things in this film that will kind of resonate with you and So yeah, it's not at all what I expected, and it's not a perfect film. It has its flaws, but it really left me with like a good feeling. I was not I would not have expected a sequel to The Shining to leave me with like a good feeling, but this film does. And Ewan McGregor is fantastic in it. I mean, when you see him like in the depths of his like trauma, when he's at rock bottom, one look at Ewan McGregor's face and you can feel it. Like you just see it on his face. The great New Zealand actor Cliff Curtis has a important supporting role in this film too. I love seeing him in films, and I'd love to see him in more stuff. So anyway, it's a film I think a lot of people don't even know exists, but it's kind of weirdly fun, and it's very interesting. Dr.
Is
Sleep.
Rebecca Ferguson?
Yes. Oh
the
man.
one who plays Rose the Hat.
Yeah. Oh boy,
I love her.
she is so good. She is so good in this too. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen King is one of the best. I mean, unsurprisingly, maybe one of the best writers on addiction.
Right.
And I mean,
Right.
he's very open about talking about his own struggles with addiction.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the same time that the man has not ever failed to insert a magical Negro in one of his texts.
Yeah.
He also
Yeah.
the man can write his ass off, he really can.
And full disclosure, Dr. Sleep does kind of have that to it, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I might check that out. I love The Shining, the movie, and I really loved the book. They are very different.
They are.
So-
And this film does a really interesting job of like trying to straddle the line between both, right? Stephen King famously really dislikes in a lot about Kubrick's film. The ending is completely different and stuff, and you can feel this movie trying to honor both the book and the film. And obviously I'm no expert on either, but it's most people who are familiar with both seem to think that this film does a pretty impressive job of like navigating that space between the book and the film.
I might watch that tonight. Interesting. Anita, do you have a freak out?
I do. I got one. I got two.
Give it to us.
No, I got one. I'll give you one. I'll save the other one for the bonus. I watched a movie called Home by the French-Swiss director Ursula Meier. It stars Isabelle Huppert, which apparently is a very famous actor that I don't know about, but she's like been in everything and has worked a lot. And
Yes.
I did some research.
I mean, she was the star of a film we talked about on the podcast once, right?
Shut up, really?
Yeah. What was
Greta.
that? What was that film called?
Greta.
Or was it just you and me?
Greta.
Yeah.
Wait, did we watch Greta?
Yeah,
We did.
we sure did.
Was I on when
Maybe
we
it was
watched
just me and Ebony that week. I
It
don't
might have
remember.
been.
Anyway, but yes, very well respected actor. Yes.
Literally, her Wikipedia article was if you want her filmography, you have to click to another page because it's so fucking long. Anyways, this film is from 2008, and I loved it. It is so bizarre in a number of ways. The premise is that there's this family who lives at the end of a freeway that has been unfinished for 10 years. So they have their house there, their kids go to school, the dad works, and one day the freeway, like construction workers come and start building the rest of the freeway. And, what does it do to this family? What does it do to like their existence and their experience? Just like both the practicalities of their life, but also like their emotional lives and experiences living literally on a freeway. And it's just so good. I really don't want to say a lot more than that because I feel like it would do a disservice to the experience of the story. But the performances are incredible. It's, like the family it is a film that doesn't share too much, but shares enough that you understand a good level of who these characters are and their concerns in life and their experiences in life. It's a pretty like untraditional family in a lot of ways. And it's really stunning. So if you like, I wouldn't say it's a Caro film necessarily, but it's a little bit like day in the life almost.
Right.
But it's fucking weird, right? And it's weird in the ways that I love, where it's like, this is just like, it's just totally normal that these people live at the end of a freeway. But that's fucking weird, you know?
Yes.
But the world allows it to be normal.
Right.
And then it kind of, you know, it grows and spirals from there. I think that, you know, someone like the father is such a fascinating figure because he's both like, you know, like, you're like, are you a good dad? But I don't know, but you kind of are at the same time. Like, there's a lot of complexity to him and who he is, and his like attempt to roll with the punches and really wants his family to be okay. So I highly recommend it if you're into that kind of thing. It's streaming right now on Criterion Channel if you have access to that, but I'm sure you can rent it in other places. So that's my freak out.
Awesome. I also want to give a shout out to Anita twice. She has recommended a book that I have then loved. She recommended the Steerswoman series. Absolutely phenomenal. And then she also, I'm sure she's the one who put it in my mind, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. Absolutely loved that movie. So Anita, your freakouts on point. Caro,
Yeah.
I'm also going to check out Dr. Sleep. Y'all both have demonstrated you can be trusted.
I don't know if we can easily do this, but I did freak out about Gods of Shade and Shadow, I think, on our freakouts. And, you know, like, either go revisit it or whatever. I'd love to talk to you more about Ebony. I absolutely loved that book and thought it was so beautiful.
So good. I could not put it down.
Except for the creepy age difference, but, you know, that's okay.
Yeah.
We just scoot right past that one. Like
Yeah.
Vampire Life or whatever.
Ugh. All right. So, hey, if y'all got freakouts, you can submit them. Submit them at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio while I was in the captain's chair. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you turned it off. You know, I will never know. Next week, we're going to be talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And oh boy, does Anita have a lot to say.
Do we have to?
Make sure you check out our new poll over on Patreon to help us determine what our next People's Choice episode is going to be. Our theme this time around is Bad Mothers. Our show is engineered by Rob Pera. Harry Stimson provides technical support. Artwork is by Jamie Varon. And our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.